Alrighty, I'm excited about this one. We don't do big intros, as I always say every week. Welcome to BackChat. We've got Shelter, Margaret River Roasting, Whippersnapper, Blue Bet, Leadable Cameras, and of course Dean Bradley, all supporters of this podcast, making things happen for you, and we love you. Thanks for listening. We've got a great man in the house, Daniel Southern. How are you, mate?
G'day, Will. Dan, how are you both?
Yeah, really good, mate. Look, it's a bit of a blast from the past. You played footy for a little while ago now, but I was a footy fan growing up, Geelong fan. So I was born in '89, so the '90s was my footy life. I used to deck the house up in blue and white, and used to see the Dogs playing down the road. But you're a West Australian boy. Yeah,
so I got drafted by the Bulldogs back in 1992, and it was a bit of a dream come true for me to go over to Victoria. I always grew up watching the VFL, and to get an opportunity to play for the Dogs was just, as I said, a dream come true. But growing up in Western Australia, the Eagles came in 87, I think, when they started. So, I always sort of had that initial sort of foundation years of supporting the VFL. So when the Eagles came into the competition, I was still very much a Victorian club supporter.
So I've jumped ahead. The first question we always ask our guests, okay? So we're going to get into your footy career, life after footy. You played 100 games for the Western Bulldogs. You played in some finals. You're a premiership player for Claremont. We're going to get into all of that. But the first question we ask every guest is, we know you've played footy. We know you can play footy. But we want to know your greatest sporting achievement not on the AFL field. We ask every guest whether they're a cricketer. You can't take your sport of choice. Dan, of course, prolific cricketer. You may have seen the trophy behind you, Daniel. Just spinning them left, right. Was it right to left?
Bowling leg spin to under 12s when I was under 12 as well, and grand final ball there. That's the ball from it. 5 wickets for 16 runs.
Brilliant, Dan.
Pretty good.
We've had footy players that are athletes. We've had leads in musicals.
Yes.
We've had poker players. We've had surfers and skaters. All footy players. Did you have any other talents and greatest sporting achievement off the football field?
Well, I guess the greatest must have been West Australian javelin champion.
Oh,
there we go. I used to chuck a spear back in my day.
Really?
So, I used to throw barefoot. Yeah, back in the days where you could sort of run around.
While everyone else was wearing shoes.
Everyone was wearing back then was wearing shoes. So, I used to take the line with barefoot and used to throw that spear as far as I could. So, I was 3-time state champion, and then I ended up losing my title. I thought I'd get ahead of the game. You always want to get the competitive edge. So, I got hold of some glucose, going for 4 in a row, and I had this big bag of glucose, and I dosed up before the event, and you wouldn't believe it, I was buzzing and burned all my energy by the time it came to throw for the state championship. I got smoked. So I learned my lesson early not to try and take that competitive edge too far, but I used to love throwing the javelin.
Hayden Ballantyne also was a javelin guy, wasn't he? Yeah.
What's going on?
Who do you reckon would win out of you and Hayden Ballantyne in a throw?
I've probably got a little bit more height on him, so I'd back myself in. But I unofficially broke the Australian record back in the day. Obviously wasn't in competition at the time. So, but I ended up hurting my elbow. It was the story of my life, as getting injured. But I ended up hurting my elbow and sort of gave the javelin away after that.
Mate, this is why we
because that seems like one of those obscure sports as a youngster. Like, no one's putting a javelin in your hand.
Yeah, it was a bit unusual. I wasn't that quick on the track. I used to love to do the little aths, and the field events were my go. And I wasn't a big burly kid. Some of them early maturers used to throw the shot put and the discus, and I probably didn't have the technique for the discus. And the javelin, for some reason, just used to launch. And I had an unusual sort of hold. I had it sort of in the V, and it used to launch it. So it was and 49.82 when I was about 12 years old.
About 49 more metres than I could throw a javelin, I reckon. I'm absolutely shocking at javelin back in the day. And that's why I love that question, because we find out some interesting thing about our guest. So Daniel Southern, West Australian boy, you get drafted to the Western Bulldogs. Growing up here in Perth, though, am I right? I've done a little bit of research. Was your mum Tanzanian? Grew up in Uganda?
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Will. Yeah, so mum was born in Tanzania, and she lived in East Africa till she was 17, and her family migrated out to Australia and ended up in the Kimberley of WA in a town called Derby. So,
is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I was born in Derby, so I moved down to Perth when I was 5. So foundation years are up there, and then sort of most of my sort of younger years was growing up around Wembley, not too far from where we are today.
Because post-career, you've done some work with Clontarf, who work with Indigenous youth and mentoring and that sort of stuff. Is that sort of full circle that sort of work then, given the Derby and the way you grew up?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I think that early exposure to sort of Indigenous communities when I was young, growing up, always had a really strong connection with all the Aboriginal players I played with, and all my mates growing up were Indigenous fellas. So it's it was. I guess when I was looking for sort of life after footy, and I'd sort of lived overseas for a little while, and then when I came back to live in Australia, it was, I knew that Jared Neesham had been doing it. He was obviously the founder of the Clontarf Foundation. He coached me at Claremont back in 1993 to a premiership, so I'd been keeping track of what he'd been doing from afar. I thought, geez, I'd love to get involved there, and for me it was just a great learning experience. I spent time in Tennant Creek, Alice Springs, and worked in one of the schools here in Perth, which has a boarding hostel, so I worked with all the young men from WA, Northern Territory, and just great exposure to the Indigenous culture, and learnt so much from the journey. So
footy as a young guy, you hurt your knee as a 15-year-old. You spend time at West Coast. West Coast look after your rehabilitation, maybe some surgeries, really get you on track, and football is a big part of your life growing up, especially as 15, 16, 17-year-old?
Yeah, very much so. I was a little bit of a scallywag, let's say, probably to the age of about 14. Yeah, a little bit mischievous, just like to go and explore a little bit. But so footy was my love from about the age of 5. I grew up in Wembley, and Subiaco Oval was just down the road, and used to sneak into the waffle games and State of Origin games used to have on the Tuesday afternoon. Used to get down there and wag school, blow up the balloons on grand final day. Used to do the helium balloons, so we used to go, and that was a way to get into the grand final for free. You go and pump up the balloons in the back shed, and then you go on the oval, let them loose, and in you go. So just loved my footy growing up, and it was always a dream of mine to play in the AFL. I went for Swan Districts here in Perth, and I love cats, I love animals, and my 2 cats were named after my favourite footballers, Ron Boucher and Keith Narkle. So one was called Boucher, one was Narkle. So it goes way back, Will, but
that's great.
Did you
just love my footy.
Did you address them by their full name sometimes, if like they pissed on something you're like?
No, I didn't. It was just Boucher, where you just get a bit of a spray. But that poor cat, when I was young, he used to get tucked into the bottom of my bed underneath the doona cover, and he wasn't allowed to escape, so he sort of conceded in the end. But I loved Boucher when I was young.
How does that connection with West Coast happen then? Because you're young, you haven't been drafted. Is there just a zonage, and you're a West Australian boy, so they're looking after you, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I was pretty talented as a young fella. I'd played state footy.
Lark medalist.
Yeah, I did win the Lark medal, which was Teal Cup. So that was a couple of years later, but I'd strange story. I left school when I was 14, and I wanted to go and do an apprenticeship. I wanted to actually do a football apprenticeship, which was, I thought jockeys ride and they become, professionals from doing an apprenticeship. I thought, why can't there be a football in an apprenticeship?
We could still be on it. It still isn't one of those.
Well, they do it these days with CEDA and other footy programs, I guess, at schools now, but sort of ahead of my time a little bit in that regard. So I spent all my time down the oval kicking a ball and trying to hone my craft and skills. But so I ended up trying out for the state schoolboys team. Used to be the 15s and 17s were schoolboys and Teal Cup, and had a really great carnival, dominated, and got to the end when they announced a state squad, and I didn't get called out. I thought, what's going on here? And so the selectors come over and said, listen, mate, it's called the state schoolboys for a reason. You've got to go to school if you want to play in a state team. So I had to go back to school. So I had to sign back for the second semester. I repeated in the second half of year 10. Ended up being captain of WA that year. Got all Australian, got picked to go to Ireland. And a couple of weeks after the National Carnival, I was playing a local grand final here against Marist and tried to clean some bloke up, came off second best, tore a lateral meniscus, so not a major injury. And out of the blue, West Coast gave me a call saying, we understand you've hurt yourself, we might be able to help you out. So went and had my first operation. It wasn't quite right. There was something just, not right about it. Bluffed my way onto the Australian tip, went over to Ireland, London, had a ball, came back, my knee was blowing up like a balloon still, and realised the surgeon had left a foreign body in my knee, so cartilages got destroyed, and that was the beginning of the end, essentially. So that's what sort of led me to West Coast,
But was that the knee that finished your career down the track?
Yeah, it is, Will, So I ended up spending 18 months training with West Coast from, 15 through to 17, which was just fantastic for a young fellow. As I said, I was a little bit of a scallywag, but being in that professional environment at that time when they were a powerhouse just really showed me what you had to do to make the highest level.
So when you say training, like I'm just thinking back to my time at West Coast, as a 15-year-old kid running around. I mean, you were always a bigger bloke. You played undersized as a backman, but what does that involve training with West Coast as a 15-year-old? Are you training?
Well, it was mainly rehab.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't able to play footy for that year and a half. So a lot of it was in the gym, a heap of work in the pool. So I used to swim like a brick when I started, but after a year and a half training with the boys, I got pretty good.
Yeah.
Had to have the old pool boy in to keep me afloat. I don't have great buoyancy. We generally sink the Southern, so that helped me out. But that exposure, a lot of touch and those sort of things. But as I said, they were winning premierships back then, and it was just a 1992 team when I was sort of around at that sort of stage was just exceptional, as I said, for a young fella to be around and just to get that exposure. And got super strong and super fit, and when I was ready to play footy again back at 17, then I was ready to go.
So you win the Lark medal, which is the best kid in the country, basically, under 18 or under 17?
17s it was back then.
So 92, you're with West Coast. That would tell me that you're going to be a high draft pick. No, I mean, no offence, but West Coast aren't going and paying for kids' surgery if they don't rate them as a footballer. Yeah,
well, I thought I was going to go pretty early in the draft. A couple of times All-Australian, and as you said, the Lark medal, which was, the Teal Cup back then it was the best and first for the Division 1. Michael Voss took out the Division 2 medal that year. So there was a few good players getting around, but from the way the story goes is that West Coast had sort of knew the extent of my injury and had pretty much told the rest of the industry that I was no good, and they were going to take me with their last draft pick, which was 110 or something of that year. So Footscray ended up rolled the dice at pick number 92, and away we went. But draft day back then, it wasn't televised like it is now. So I'm sitting at home listening to the wireless. It was like waiting for the hourly or half an hour updates as to who's getting drafted. And I think there was 13 players from our Teal Cup team, so our state team got drafted that year, and I was the last one. So
any memorable names?
The Gasper boys played there. Sean McManus, Peter Bell was underages.
Some players.
It was a lot of guys. Stephen Jurica. There was a few guys. Tony Delaney. There's a lot of guys that ended up playing a significant amount of footy. So it was, I don't know, it was a bumper draft, but number 92, mate. It was.
I was going to say, so West Coast miss out. They take you at 92, which is hilarious as well. There's not 92 draft picks anymore. They're out the window, and so you rock up to the Western Bulldogs. Were you a West Coast fan growing up in Western Australia?
No, I wasn't. I used to actually love St Kilda. Yeah, I used to love Tony Lockett. He was my idol, sort of at that early teens, I guess, and so I loved the Saints and. Yeah, having that exposure. I actually wore a shirt once, which I shouldn't have worn. I went and watched the 91 grand final when Hawthorn beat West Coast. I was, 15, 16, I guess, with my brother. And I brought a Hawthorn sort of shirt, and it had an eagle in the crosshairs and had some foul language on it. And I was wearing it one day, and I forgot I was going to training. I just went down to the Eagles training, and I was like, oh, hang on a minute. I've got this inappropriate T-shirt on. So I had to get a jacket from the property store. It was 40 degrees in the middle of summer. I was like, this kid's a bit weird.
What's Danny training with a jacket on for?
So I didn't actually, but used to love going to watch the boys train. I used to go and watch the Eagles train every week. I'd go get the footies behind the goals, and used to every now and then sneak one under the seats to have a little bit of kick with later on. And it was just great memories for me, just watching the professionals. That's always what I aspired to do, was play footy.
So you were drafted at 92, but you're a premiership player in 93 for Claremont.
Yep.
And then you don't debut to 94. So how's that system working?
Yeah, so back then there was 52 players on the list. And because I hadn't played footy for the best part of a year and a half, I basically had played, I think, 3 games of Colts footy before the Teal Cup Carnival.
Yeah.
And Jared Neesham was coaching Claremont at the time. He just said, listen, young fella, it's great you've been drafted, but you haven't played footy much in the last couple of years. How about you stay a year, play for Claremont, play with the men, and then when you're ready to head over to Melbourne, you should be primed and ready to roll. So it worked out very well for me. I was lucky enough to play in a premiership in 1993 at Waffle level as an 18-year-old, playing at centre-half back, which was, they're very hard to come across, Will, as you know. It flags, no matter what level of footy you're playing, they're hard to come by. So, it was great to get a flag, and by the time I hit sort of Victoria, as a 19-year-old at that stage, I was ready to go in the AFL and had a pretty good start to my season. Played 24 in my first year.
Yeah, every game, right?
Yeah, and it was all downhill from there pretty much. But we got off to a good start.
At least you started well.
Yeah, exactly right.
Did you were you a bit miffed about having to stay at Claremont for the year? At the time, were you like, I just want to go play? Or did you, I don't know, as an 18-year-old, some would be a bit pissed that they have to stay in the Waffle? Yeah, no, I was actually really comfortable with it, to be honest, Dan, because I hadn't played footy for a year and a half in those sort of key years, and
it just gave me that ability to actually match it with men. From playing. The last time I played footy was basically 15, besides a handful of games. So to step up and the luxury of having 52 players on the list. And back then, it's not like today where you get drafted and you're expected to play that next year. You really had to. It was old school. You had to earn your stripes, earn your respect. Most of the players would generally spend at least 1 year in the reserves, if not a couple, before they sort of got a crack at the league team. But it sort of put me in good stead moving forward because the time I was ready to go. And stepped up and played every game, so it worked out well, Dana.
When you got to Western Bulldogs, did you get a bit of were the veterans a bit harder on rookies in those days? Did you carrying around bags for them and a bit of some pranks and stuff on you?
Not quite to that extent, but you did definitely have to earn their respect. Yeah, you didn't speak too often unless you were sort of asked a question. You sort of just went in there. You learnt from the old stages. I guess Steve McPherson, if anyone's familiar with Super, and Doug Hawkins, and they were the veterans back then. Stephen Wallace, Mitch Wallace's father. So you didn't speak too much, and you just sort of head down, bum up, and sort of got the work done. And I used to love training. I used to love training hard. So I guess it was not easier to earn their respect, but if you come into a club with that sort of attitude, and I was physically strong and physically ready to go, and it worked out pretty good.
You were a physical player throughout your whole career. Early days, you come in and play in the back line for the Western Bulldogs, playing against some good players. I mean, the 90s, there was some full forwards rolling around at the time. Did you play on any of the Dunstals, the Ablets, the Locketts? Did you get to play on those guys?
Yeah, pretty much played on them all. My second game of footy, I'm not sure whether you were there, 1994.
Probably. I was probably sledging you on.
Yeah, I'm sure it was down at the
5-year-old
Cardinia Park. So my second game of footy, I played on Gary Ablett Senior.
Perfect.
That's not what you want, Will. I'd never played fullback in my life. I liked playing centre half back. You could sort of cheat a little bit there and get off and get a bit of footy and fill the hole a little bit and get a couple sort of intercept ones there. But playing one-on-one inside 50 against Gazadette and Cardinia Park, mate, it wasn't pretty. He's kicked 4 in the first quarter, and I thought, here we go. It's going to be over before it's begun.
Oh.
Yeah, he ended up kicking 7 that day.
So you did well for the
not too bad. Yeah, well, he kicked 130 odd that year.
Because there's a couple of backmen talking about, 7's not too bad.
Exactly right. Back then.
At least he didn't kick 16.
Yeah, exactly. He was kicking 15 and 16 back then. Yeah, it was, so I played on all the great. I didn't play much on Plugger or Wayne Carey, just they were a little bit big for me. So just on the crossover, played on, but pretty much all the rest of them, Dunstall and, the list goes on, from Barry Hall, Fraser Garrick to, to James Hurd, did I say James? Matthew Lloyd, Adam Goods, young fellow coming through. Every week there was a champion, so there was nowhere to hide, and none of this zone defence like they got these days, Will, mate. It was just one-on-one inside 50. You wanted to be able to make sure there's a bit of pressure on in the midfield. If the ball was coming in there, it was just lamb to the slaughter. And so I held my own against some of the greats. If you look at the top 10 goal kickers of all time, I played on quite a few of them.
Bloody hell!
I probably helped them out get to that 1,000. Yeah, I was close to it.
Well, I was kind of thinking, doing research for this interview, and people that don't know you or haven't heard you speak, which a lot of people listening to this would be the first time they've heard Daniel Southern speak or do a lot of media. You had there was Danny Southern, right? And you were this physical, hard-nosed defender. But from everything I've read, and I don't know you that well, but was it white line fever? Was it this football aura that wasn't you? Because I don't know if Danny Southern matches up with Daniel sitting in front of me.
Yeah, good point, Will. Yeah, I used to call it my stage name, Danny Southern. Yeah, I'd never been called Danny before in my life, and went to Victoria. Dan, I'm not sure if you like getting called Danny, but
very rarely.
Yeah, I'd never liked it growing up. Anyway, I went to Victoria, and they branded me Danny Southern. But I love the contest, Will. I don't know whether it was white line fever because, but I just love the physical aspect of game, and I used to like to pride myself on my courage and put my body on the line when the time was there and. Paid the price. I got pretty busted up and hurt over the journey, but I guess the reputation I played up to a little bit. I looked a little bit rough and a bit rugged, and got to do a couple sort of
decent head of hair.
Get a little bit of rat tail or a mullet or whatever it might have been rocking at the time, and so I sort of played up to that a little bit. My first year in the AFL, there was a couple sort of, prominent sort of all-in brawls, let's say, melees, or whatever you want to describe it as, that I sort of played a significant part in, and it sort of added to that reputation a little bit. So for me, it actually helped me in a playing sense, because I wasn't the most talented, most gifted player, but, you know, if you could get in somebody's head thinking this bloke's a little bit loose or, he's, you know, what's he capable of, you know, it played in my favour to a degree. Against the champions, it didn't ever bother them. I'm sure Gary Ablett was never intimidated of me running down onto him. But, you know, there's a few other players in the competition you could get in the head, so it definitely helped me out. But, yeah, I just loved the contest and like that. And it was a hard, tough, not saying it's not a hard, tough game now, but it was pretty physical.
I'm finished now, mate.
Yeah.
They're weak as
it's not like it was. It was a pretty tough, brutal sport, and it still is. But
well, I definitely, you know, as a fan growing up, and I was only young when you were playing, but players like you, and, you know, my favourite player was Darren Milburn growing up, and that hard physicality, I did try to bring that into my game as well, so I can, you know, understand exactly what you're saying. And some people used to think, you know, white line fever. So I use that word, but I never thought I had white line fever either. I used to like the contest and like being physical. And I wasn't, sometimes I couldn't match it physically in terms of my ability, maybe not strong enough, or maybe they were a bit quicker, so I would be physical. Yeah. Like that was a tool I had, you know, not taking a big specky, I would get physical and bash them up behind the play.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Now we're talking, Will.
Correct. But could you shake hands at the end of the game with everyone? It was all
100%.
All good?
Yeah, 100%. I did get reported a couple of times trial by video. Long story, a couple of those, but I never crossed that line in regards to, you know, belting someone or, you know, dirty elbows or snipe someone behind play. If they were fair game, the ball was on the line, and I used to pride myself on playing within the rules, but pushing the boundaries of the rules to make sure you could have impact physically. So
what about the swimming team? So I just want to talk about that quickly if possible, because, you know, clearly, again, research from my end, I would love to hear what you say about it. It's not a moment you're proud of. It was big over here in the West, so when it happened, and that would, some people would say that was across the line, you know, potentially what could or can happen on the footy field. What are your reflections on it?
Yeah, well, it was.
And how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, it was a strange day that day. As I said, I grew up in the shadows of Subiaco Oval, and it was the first game back in WA as a 19-year-old. It was the last game of the year, and I was pretty excited about coming back to Perth and playing against West Coast. And the incident started. Steve Wallace had sort of bumped Brett Hetty right on the halftime siren and knocked him clean out.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you know, push went to shove and it was on. And so I was actually on the bench that time, and the brawl started just in. Anyway, I've gone out there, and I didn't mean to
come off the bench.
Come off the bench, because you were all going back to the race, and one thing led to the other, and it was just a really unfortunate situation because I didn't mean to hurt Peter. I did get him in a headlock on the ground, and the rules within at the time were you're allowed to wrestle. And if the umpire came and gave you a standing count for 3 and you didn't let go, then you could get reported for it.
That's like WWF.
It was very much so, yeah.
Like on the ground hitting the floor.
I don't know, imagine it, eh? Yeah. Yeah, so it was so in amongst the hurly and burly of, 40 blokes, and there was blokes throwing punches. There was plenty going on out there. And so I just sort of had Peter in a headlock and held on, and there was a few people dragging me around, and then I felt him go limp, and I thought, geez, this, it's not good. And so I've let go, and I've looked down, and he wasn't in a good way, and his eyes had sort of rolled back in his head, and I fed him, thought he was dead. I thought I'd sort of killed him. I did a little bit of judo when I was young. You talked about other sports and stuff, but so when I did have him in a headlock, I had him in a really good grip, and it was just one of them unfortunate things that happened, and it got really messy after that because it was the last game of the season, as I mentioned, and we got flogged, and we jumped on the plane and headed back and didn't know what had happened very much. We'd gone back in after half time. We come out and Peter wasn't there. And we just pretty much jumped on the plane and took off, not knowing his condition or his health or anything like that. So it wasn't until we got back to Tullamarine and there's a, heap of media at the airport that I thought, geez, okay, maybe he's not in a good way. And really struggled with that personally. As a young fella coming to the game and the media exposure went around it, and we were playing Geelong in the first final, the one that Billy Brownless kicked the goal after a siren. He was on me that night. So cut a long story
short. That led into that.
So that led into that, and it was a big investigation from the AFL because none of us I hadn't done anything outside of the rules of the game. you know. So it was a big investigation, and then I think there was about 20 players got cited. It pushed late into the week, so it was too late to have the tribunal hearing. So we went into that Geelong game without having been to the tribunal yet, and then I went the following Monday, I think it might have been.
Right.
And so it dragged out, and it was, you know, Ivan Milat was killing backpackers in the Belangolo Forest, and I was on the front page of the paper,
wow,
front and centre for that week, and it was a really challenging time for me. And there's not back then, there's not the support like the players have these days. There's no one guiding me. We just sort of, you know, rolled with the punches, and
no one's writing you a statement.
You had to play in a final.
Had to play in a final, that night, and had a pretty good game until the last minute when my opponent kicked the goal after the siren, and Gary Ablett was actually, I have to be honest, he eye gouged one of my mates, Steve Crediuk, and it was on behind play, and, you know, I was sort of live in regret because, you know, I used to like the physical aspect of the game, and I watched me mate get sort of touched up by Gazza and didn't really have the guts to go and
because of what had happened.
Because I hadn't even been to the tribunal, and I just about killed someone the week before, and it was on. And it was like, what do I do here? You know, so I've sort of gone and got him off him, but it was I was torn, and still am to this day.
Well, I mean, you can hear it in your voice that, you know, have you seen Summer?
I saw him only a few years ago, Will, and as I said before, it didn't have that connection. No one had socials. There was nothing like that. So, you know, landline, we probably could have got on the blower and give him a call on the landline and left a message if he had a voicemail back then. But so I never saw Peter until we played West Coast the next season, I guess. And then, you know, once you've sort of got that rivalry on the footy field, you want to sort of keep that, you know, to a degree. Yep. You know, you want to try and use that.
He was a good player.
He was a very good player, and the West Coast were a great team. You know, they won the flag '94. So if we could play them, you know, and have a little bit of a competitive edge psychologically, then that was going to hopefully play in our favour. It never did. They always smoked us. But and so then once the water had passed under the bridge, you know, before you know it, nearly 15, 20 years had passed before I had the opportunity to actually catch up with Peter. And I had seen him at one event once, and I shit myself and I took off. I didn't have the nerve to go and approach him and apologise. And then it was only by chance I saw him at a coffee shop in Fremantle, and you know, I was talking to my wife and said, "Oh, there's Peter Sumich," and she said, "Well, get off your seat and go and say sorry to him." So
got a good lady, got a good lady behind you.
Yeah, she definitely knew how to make me walk off the cliff. It was like, and he was with a few mates as well. I was like, here we go. But no, he was brilliant, you know, and so I just apologised to him and gave him a hug, and the way he accepted my apology, you know, obviously he was very disappointed with what had happened, and I know his family was, and they have every right to as well, you know. So it was nice to actually put that one to bed. It was a few years ago now, but I'm talking only 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Did you cop it a fair bit from the crowd? You said you didn't see him again until we played West Coast, because like if you think Andrew Gaff versus Fremantle, he still gets booed to this day from the Brayshaw thing. So what was that like with the crowd?
Yeah, it was pretty intense. Subiaco Oval back then. So every time we came back and played the Eagles, it was. Nice welcome.
You made sure the mullet was flowing extra long.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, no, and it's still cop it to this day, really. You know, West Australians have got long memories, and it was a very significant event back then. I ended up getting fined $10,000 for it. Didn't get found guilty besides bringing the game into disrepute, but
which was 25% of your salary.
Yeah, back then. Yeah, so you know
that's a big fine.
Yeah, if you look at it today, is what the
someone on $1 million getting to $250,000 fine.
That's huge.
Yeah, well, it was my first year, so I wasn't on $1 million. But if let's look, the first year play 100 plus, you know, maybe equivalent to maybe 50,000, I guess, in today's sort of money. So significant whack, and you know, and the West Australians do have a long memory. So if I'm walking anywhere these days, someone often heckles me or comes as a bit of a joke about it, but. You know, it hasn't been forgotten, that's for sure.
Appreciate you talking about that, mate. I did want to transition to back to playing on some of those greats. I watched something before about Gary Ablett. So Gary Ablett I'm Geelong boy. Yep. I'm from Geelong, right? So he was the guy. It was just
what a champion. How good is he? Best player of all time for me.
Yeah. You said that he used to commentate games behind the play. So again, me fullback. Not a lot of guys talk. Tom Hawkins was a bit of a talker. Lance Franklin knew he was better than you, so you should just tell you.
Yep.
Because Gary Ablett used to stand watching the play commentating.
It would be like, I should have listened to him a bit more closely. Wouldn't have kicked 7, you know, if I was reacted a little bit quicker. But, you know, it'd go up for the the ruck contest. He goes, Barnsley's up, taps it down to Hocking, out to Couchy, and he's Bairstow, and he'd give you a whack in the guts, and off you'd go. And next minute, he used to hang in the air. You'd jump early and just sort of hover, and then just clunk it, and you say, "Oh, here we go." But so he was that involved in the game that he was reading it, but was vocalising at the time. So
I mean, this is from a man who's kicked over 1,000 goals. He kicked over 1,000.
Yeah, he did.
So it obviously worked.
Yeah.
Was it a tactic? Was it just like almost in his back, or was it like another voice? Like what was going on?
I guess he was just that focused and concentrating. Yeah, that he was sort of trying to read the play of what was happening, and what his teammates were capable of, and they used to spin the ball pretty good out of midfield, and once someone was out loose, and look out, that's when you get you on the lead. But yeah, so the next time I played him, actually, I did listen to his commentary. He only kicked 2, so it was much better than the 7 he got the first day, Will. So I did learn my lesson a little bit.
That's very good. Gaz knows where this is going. I'm still listening to him. Okay, so you played at Western Bulldogs, Whitten Oval, the tradition, again, from afar, it seems like a traditional club, a football club. Some teams around the league, I look around and don't know if they're a footy club. Western Bulldogs are a football club. You played in the last game at Whitten Oval. Can you speak about that? The supporters, the footy club, what it was like to be a Bulldog?
Yeah, it was amazing. Very working class. The geographical landscape of the western suburbs of Victoria and Footscray in particular, very grassroots, working class, sort of blue collar, and they just really embraced me. The people of the western suburbs, and I used to drive a 1-ton ute with a V8 and had pit bulls and had the mullet, and I was probably stereotypical, the blessed son, here he comes, he's come home. So, but it was brilliant just playing that sort of suburban ground, and we never used to get big crowds there, but it was always wet and windy, and it helped me playing down back, playing on Dunstall and these sort of guys. Lucky you can get them in perfect conditions, it would be howling and belting down with rain. It'd be muddy. It's like, brilliant, I'm a chance today. He's only going to kick a couple. He's not going to kick 10. So,
scrap him.
Yeah, exactly right. So, and I was really fortunate in my first pre-season, I was over at the Bulldogs, that late, great Ted Whitten had lost his licence. So Kim Costa ended up playing a couple of flags at Adelaide, was his chauffeur, and I had nothing on. So I used to go out with Ted Whitten all day, pretty much every day, taking him to his meetings and those sort of things. And he used to spend a lot of time in Geelong working for Adidas. And so Teddy was, the heart and soul of the western suburbs and the Bulldogs. And
you were driving him around?
Yeah, I imagine. Classic, hey? Yeah, so it was like, and he was so entertaining. Yeah, he was just great value. And he ended up giving me my nickname. My nickname was Yock. So just spending that sort of 3 months with Ted, and we got to the first Guernsey presentation, and I was number 8, and he goes, "Number 8, the Yocks," and I was like, well, that must be me. Yeah, so everyone took me in, and it was just felt really privileged, I guess, to be part of that fabric of the footy club.
What sort of a bloke is he? There wouldn't be many people around that had, because spending time in a car with someone is very personal, right? You're not just sitting there in silence. What sort of a bloke was he?
Always up and about. Yeah. He loved being Ted Whitten, and he was larger than life, and he had a couple songs written about him. So you'd be sitting in the car, and he'd like put on the old cassette, and he'd like, "Fellas, listen to this." And it'd be a song about Teddy. And then he'd like undo the window. There was someone be walking there. I remember there was a bloke in the car next to me, goes, "Hey, Knackers, listen to this." And he's like turned it up, and it was like Teddy, EJ. And it was like, so he was brilliant. He'd walk down the street, and if anyone got in his way, he was sort of not too happy about it. He was like the king's coming through. But he had a heart of gold, super generous. And I was really lucky to have that exposure to, such a legend of the game at in my first, few months at the footy club. And obviously, the Whitten Oval was the Western Oval prior to that, and playing that the last game. It was another incident we had with the Eagles, Will. So yes. I wonder why they hate me. So it was that last game we welcomed Michael Gardner to the kennel, which ended up being quite a significant event again. So
a little bit lighter in the back pocket.
Yeah, I was. That time only 7,500.
Did you make any money out of football?
No, mate, I'm still in debt. I'm still paying it off.
Still paying fines.
Oh, no. Everyone thinks, you must have done well out of footy. Well, do the sums. No.
Yeah, I did. Didn't the Western Bulldogs, coterie group or fans group try to raise money to pay some of your fines?
Well, they actually did. Yeah, they actually did pay that 10 grand. I didn't actually pay a cent of that. I ended up making some money out of it in the end. Out of reality, it was
crowdfund.
Yeah, it was back then.
The original crowdfund.
They actually rattled tins back in the day where you'd walk around getting the gold coin donation type thing, and they raised the 10,000.
Wow.
And then I kept getting money sent into me, like
in the mail?
Like 6 months in the mail. At the footy club, you'd rocking in on a Tuesday morning. There'd be a stack of letters coming in for the fans and stuff, and there was like 5, 10s, $2 coins. It was costing me a fortune in postage. It was like, you got to stop. I was trying to send it back. It was
coins.
so it got to the stage where I can't keep sending it back. So it was.
That's
but
amazing.
just the kindness of the people who who rattled the cans and paid the fine for me. So it didn't end up costing me anything in the
That's
end.
amazing. So you're a backman, but you kicked some goals. Dan was actually
I was watching some highlights. You kicked probably one of the most creative goals I've ever seen. Do you remember? Do you know the one? Does one come to mind?
He knows. I bet you he knows.
I know that one did pop up on social media not that long ago. It was
your
the one where I had a
set
shot from 30 metres out, didn't make the distance, and then it was. You watched it before, if it's a goal over my sort of head when I kicked it on the goal line, I had a set shot from about 30 out. It didn't make the distance. And it ended up going out of bounds on the far side. It was like, Jesus.
Oh, well, that set up the goal.
The play, mate.
What's the goal?
So, you explain it. So, your back's to the goals on the goal square.
So, I'm on the goal line, and then it was, as I said, it was a boundary throw, and I think...
From your kick.
From my kick, it didn't make the distance from 30.
Backman.
Yeah, exactly right. Who put him up forward? Yeah, and anyway, so it was a ruck contest. I think one of our players socketed it, and another one socketed it, and I'm sort of on the goal line, and I've sort of thought, okay, well, I'll join the party here, and I've sort of just socketed it over my head as I'm sort of jostling with, I think, Brad Scott or Chris Scott, one of the Scott boys, on the goal line. And,
you like it?
It was like a Ronaldo move, flicking it over his head. It was
not quite off the ground like Ronaldo.
Just imagine the athleticism mullet,
but
rat's tail flowing in the breeze, rolling out a bicycle, kicking the goal.
Mate. So I've got 28 goals out of 103 games. So not a bad return for a
not like he was keeping tickets either. Knows exactly how many.
I do know the stats of that one because everyone asked, "Did you ever kick any goals?" I said, 28 at the best. They always say you remember your first goal in footy. I don't know about you, Will. I can't remember my first goal in footy. So
mine was on my left.
Was it brilliant? Yeah,
and no one knew. I do remember because I'm pissed off about it. I came off the bench, and I was meant to go in the back line. And this is like back in the day. This is 2008. It would have been. So it wasn't not that long ago, but. Instead of going back, the ball was on the other side. I was like, oh, stuff it. I'm just going to run forward. So I just ran to the fat side of the ground to the goal square, and the ball sort of followed around, and no one knew I was there. Got kicked over. Someone miskicked it, landed in my arms, and I sort of played on and kicked on my left foot. I will say it was one of only 2 left foot kicks I did in my whole career.
Really?
And it was my first.
The other one was out in the full?
And it got put away in the goalkeeper. But no one knew it was my first goal because it was sort of halfway through my second season. It's kind of one of those ones like I was a backman, like no one would even know it was a first goal. So maybe like I was carrying on like it was my first goal. There was like one person gave me a high five. Yeah, so
not like it is these days. Everyone knows who's kicked goals.
Yeah, that's right. Social media, mate.
Yeah, that's what it must be. I've got
missed out.
On socials.
So your footy career, you play over 100 games with Western Bulldogs. You play in 2 final series, both straight sets, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think we played. I played 7 seasons. We missed finals 1 year.
Right,
it was just 96. It would have been, but 97, 98 were our years.
So you had successful sides.
Yeah,
right?
we were in the hunt. We were in the mix. 97 was our year.
Yeah.
I missed the final series that year because you spoke about the West Coast last game at the Western Oval.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we cut a long story short. I got fined for that game, $7,500. The following week we played Hawthorn out at Waverley, and Scott West was wrestling with Shane Crawford and I think Richie Taylor, and I've sort of come from behind and grabbed one in one arm and one in the other, and we've sort of gone to the ground, and I've got pinched for wrestling, trial by video, and got suspended for a week.
Wow, I missed the final.
And missed the final. Strength and conditioning is not like it is today, mate, so I used to go and do the tan. So I went and did the tan, a couple sprints up Annan Street Hill and pulled up a little bit short, and so I missed the prelim, and then it would have been right to go for the grand final, but I think 28 points up with 15 minutes to go in that 97 prelim against Adelaide.
Adelaide.
Yeah, they overran us, and that was it. So it was as close as we got. But we were a good team, and we had everything you sort of needed. We had some class that could finish. We had blokes that were just workhorses who'd roll the sleeves up and get the job done, and we had the guys that would push the rules of the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, just not good enough at the end, unfortunately, Will. So yeah, we're close.
So your career finishes though as a 25-year-old.
Yeah, 25, done and dusted.
Bung knee, basically.
Yeah. So what killed me is that 2000 season. It was the first season they opened Marvel Stadium, and they laid the grass there on Thursday night.
It was like a car park.
Oh, it was a car park, it was. And so round one was away, then we played 7 games in a row there, and I never played footy again. So, someone that's got degenerative bone-on-bone condition, I was falling and chipping big bits of bone off of my knee. I've got a couple of jars at home with, a couple sort of pebbles of bones that sort of chipped off of my knee. So, it got to the stage where I was having needles to train, needles to play it before half-time, three-quarter time even at the end, get it drained midweek. I had a Victorian terrace house, so I couldn't walk upstairs on a Friday afternoon, and you have to go and play on a, Matthew Lloyd or whoever it was back then.
Yeah.
Good luck. Yeah. So it just got the end where mentally I couldn't put up with the pain anymore, and tapped out at 25, unfortunately. But yeah, that's the way it went.
So the ground was that hard that when every time you ran, it was just like jarring your bones.
It killed me, Dan. Yeah, it did. Right. With that particular knee condition that I had, it was very, very sore.
People again who don't know you well would see that you made a move to Egypt post-career. It wasn't your first time to Egypt, though, before we get into your time there. You travelled there a bit during your career, didn't you?
Yeah, I was really blessed that I had the opportunity to travel when I was playing footy. So every year I'd take off for the off-season, and you'd get your 10 weeks off, and I'd just jump on a plane. And this was Lonely Planet guidebook days, no winter and that. So you just go on a wing and a prayer to wherever you could go, as far away from footy as you could.
Yeah.
And so I travelled a little bit in Egypt prior to going to live there. But my love in life was wildlife. I love animals. So I used to go on safari. I love sort of indigenous cultures, so I'd try and meet First Nations people around the world. Ancient history, so I'd go and have a look at some of the great sites around the world. And so my travels did lead me to Egypt a couple of times before I went to live there, but that was a whole different experience going to live in,
Well, this is what I mean about Danny Southern and Daniel Southern. I think people think Danny Southern with the rat's tail used to get people in headlocks and bash people up on the field. To hear you talk about ancient history, love of animals, love of nature, indigenous culture, like it's you that's who you are, right?
Very much so, yeah. And so it was sort of, as I said, the stage name was Danny Southern, but me behind the scenes, I'd as I said, I left school when I was 14, and so I wanted to really educate myself by travelling. So I'd spend most of my time away from footy was down at the local library, and as I said, there was no internet back then, so if I wanted to research, Kenya or the Maasai or the San or whatever it might be, I need to go to the library and try and find a book or an encyclopedia and, get your one paragraph of knowledge and there it is, it's in the memory bank, and then sort of take it from there. But, so I was sort of always trying to just develop myself, and particularly those areas of interest that I loved.
What sells papers? Danny Southern suspended a $7,500 fine, or Danny Southern seen in the library. Do you know what I mean?
I wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, exactly.
The average punter wouldn't have believed it, but that's how I used to seek refuge. It was terrific, and having a little bit of a profile back in Melbourne in the day, it was sort of always hard to escape. You know what it's like here in a sort of two-team town, that you can never escape the sort of scrutiny in the public, sort of I guess wanting to connect with you, which is a wonderful thing. But
didn't you lose your passport the first time you went to Egypt?
I did. You've done some real good research. I was pretty raw, pretty ready. So I've landed in Cairo, and I'd already run out of money at this stage. So my first trip,
landed.
I went on a footy trip. We went to Vegas.
Yes.
The boys. Yes. 19-year-old with a couple of old wily veterans. So that was a bit of an eye opener. And then took off, went to London, went to Amsterdam, had a flight booked to Cairo. And I was going to Kenya. Mum was living in Kenya at that stage. So I've landed in Cairo, and I've got hustled at the airport like you do, and ended up with a taxi, and he sort of ended up taking me to this dodgy hotel. I had no idea where I was going to. And then I checked in that night, and I just thought, okay, where's all my gear? And you wouldn't believe it, I left my passport in the back of the taxi. Here we go.
What's that feeling like?
No money, no passport. What am I going to do here? And luckily, I'd organised it, because he was a hustler, he'd organised to pick me up the next day to take me out to the pyramids and take me papyrus and gold and oil shops and this sort of stuff to try and make an earn. But so he's rocked up the next morning, and sure enough, the passport's still in the back seat of the car.
No.
I was like, it was a sleepless night, and I couldn't contact Mum. I had no idea, mate, but it worked out well in the end. So,
you got back into Australia.
And I got to Kenya, and I went on safari, and I seen my first lion in the wild, and it worked out well.
What about your time in Egypt, and you met your wife there? You had first child there. An eventful time. but pretty special as well. I mean, it set you up for life, right?
Yeah, I went with a backpack and came back with a wife and a kid. So I definitely went the wrong path somewhere. I wasn't quite signed up for that. But yeah, so amazing experience. So yeah, I spent the best part of 10 years in Egypt in the end. And so after footy had finished, I was a little bit lost in transition for a while. I was working in the media, just doing 6-7 hours of media work a week, and studied tourism. I went back and studied tourism. I was like, okay, what can I do that I'm really passionate about, that I can sort of have a career, and travel it was. So I ended up going to Egypt to work as a tour guide or tour leader. So I was based in Cairo. I was running trips from Cairo through to Istanbul, through Jordan, Syria, Turkey, and trips in Libya. So I did that for like 3 years on the road. It was just an amazing experience. Loved it.
Stupid question. Speaking English? Like, are you doing this in English? Or?
Yeah, well, it was all... worked for a company called Intrepid Travel, Australian, Melbourne-based company. And so all of our clients were English speaking.
Yes.
But, you know, when you're on the road, mate, you got 12 paying customers and you're trying to get from Cairo to Istanbul and you don't speak Arabic and you don't speak Turkish. And the first time that I went to Syria and Turkey, and Libya, I had 12 clients coming with me, and I was like, all right, let's go to Syria.
Pretend like you know what you're doing. All right,
exactly right, bravado. Exactly right. You tell me, that's not intimidating. You hop off at bus station.
Don't worry about Gary Ablett in the goal square.
Did you still have the hair at the time?
The rat tail?
No, not the rat tail. I had a full mane of hair. I grew my hair nice and long. My wife would say that I had to comb over, and I was sort of putting on the last stand before I had to concede and went bald. So
you're genuinely me.
I had it long, you know, and I thought it was long, thick mane of hair, but it was
thin,
probably a bit thin. At best.
Yes. I was married with long hair. Same thing, just covering the baldness.
Yeah. So my wife, before we got married, it was like she got the hair scissors to it and cut it off. But yeah, so that was intimidating experience. But I'd always just try and fill the punter, you know, the customers with confidence that, okay, I've travelled to 60 countries. I haven't been to Libya before, but, you know, you're in good hands. You know, hope for the best, mate. You had a couple of sort of cheat notes, but once again, there was no internet or anything, so you hop off.
Are you just making things up as you go? Like if someone asks you a question, you're just like, oh yeah, that's because of this.
I'd always try and be as honest as I could, you know, but there was times where you sort of, okay, I don't have the answer for that. I don't know how to get out of this bus station, but let's go.
People would have had the best time of their life, because it was real.
Yeah, it definitely was real. And back then, the Middle East was still pretty volatile, you know. So my first 12 months leading tours, I missed 12 bombs by the space of sort of 24 hours. So I'd either just been somewhere and an accident had gone off, or I was on my way there, so you have to divert and find a new route. So it was action-packed. Yeah, it was never a dull moment. Amazing experiences. And I hope to think that all the people that travelled with me had a great time, because, you know, we travel, you're not selling anything tangible, it's an experience. So it was definitely raw, and it was, you know, we were taking public transport. It wasn't, you know, tours in coaches and those sort of things. It was like, let's catch whatever we can. Let's just get from A to B.
What about converting to Islam, mate? So religion, I mean, it can be a heavy topic, but if you're comfortable talking about it, I've been incredibly intrigued as how that comes about, I suppose.
Yeah, so basically, early days, so when I was 5 or 6, we went backpacking through Southeast Asia, through Indonesia predominantly, and it sort of gave me some early exposure to Islam. And then once I started playing footy, you know, I used to travel in the Islamic world a fair bit. And I used to live in Flemington in Melbourne, and there was a place called the Doadan Cafe. It's a Somalian guy called Muhammad. His name was Muhammad Ali, who owned this coffee shop. But Muhammad's the most popular name in the world, and Ali's the second most. So,
right, perfect.
So Muhammad Ali, he was a champion. So I used to go and seek refuge there with all the taxi drivers and stuff, and eat meals there probably 2 or 3 days a week. And so I used to have yarns with Muhammad. We'd talk about religion and culture and all sorts of stuff. So he really educated me about their religion. And then September 11 happened, and at that stage it was, you know, Islam got obviously some really negative media, and every sort of Muslim was a terrorist and those sort of things. I thought, well, that's not Islam I know. It's not the friends who I share company with. It's not from my experiences I've had travelling the world. And so I started to delve a little bit deeper and explore it a little bit more and get a little bit more of an understanding. And then when I went to live in Egypt, and I guess it was about a year of living in the Middle East, it just felt like a natural sort of progression for me. So I did what they call the Shahada, my confession of faith, there in Cairo. And yeah, that was nearly 20 years ago now.
And
so it
so
sort of led me there. If that's
like a practicing Muslim? Is there differences between that?
Oh, it's like any religion will. You know, I guess most people are Catholics or Christians around here, whether they go to church or not, does it mean if they're practicing or not? But I fast during Ramadan, and I'm probably not as devout with my prayer. It's a very disciplined, sort of structured life if you pray 5 times a day. Yeah. And things get in the way, so I'd not religiously pray 5 times every day, but I'm a Muslim and it's in my heart. And
that's cool. Yeah, I like that. So you met your wife over in Egypt as well. And
she didn't know what she was getting in for. Like some burnout hippie with long hair. I don't know what she felt for me, Will. Seriously, like, please.
That's unreal. So how many kids do you have?
So I got 2 boys. So I had Zachariah, who was born in Egypt. So he was born right in the middle.
Yeah, can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Egyptian Revolution. Yeah. So that was a pretty interesting time to be in the Middle East, and my wife was due on the 25th of January, which was the day that sort of the revolution started in Egypt. And so he ended up coming to the world on the 2nd of February, so it's sort of almost 2 weeks, a little bit longer than a week, into the revolution. And so it was an amazing day, because when the revolution took place and all the police withdrew from the streets and it became lawless, and the government released about 30,000 prisoners on the streets, and it was just on for young and old. So if you actually did go out in the street, every 50, 100 metres you'd come across a checkpoint, and it would be sort of armed men with whatever weapon you can imagine.
Like militia?
Yeah, well, some were militia, some were police, some were thugs, some were civilians just looking after their
neighbourhood,
their block.
Right.
So you didn't know what you were going to run into. So, when we had to book my wife in to try and have a C-section because she was so overdue, just getting to the airport was... I wish I could get to the airport because we were trying to evacuate. I was working in tourism at that time. We were trying to evacuate everyone out of the country.
Because on the day that your wife gave birth, that was the day they said all foreigners out of the city, right?
Yes, it was. They started targeting foreigners because they said there was a foreign hand involved in the revolution. So we actually had a friend, Australian guy, who came to visit us in the hospital, who they got attacked on the way to the hospital and got the car smashed up, and were pretty lucky to get away with their lives. And so they were targeting foreigners. And so, as I said, I was working in tourism. We evacuated 500 passengers that we'd had when I was working with Intrepid, and there wasn't too many foreigners left on the ground. So the day that my son was born was called the Battle of the Camel, which was a pretty famous day in the revolution. And as a crow flies, we were probably a kilometre away from Tahrir Square, where all the action was going down, and it was gunfire all night and helicopters flying around, and here I am, and there was no phones, there's a cut all phone service, and I'm sitting in the hospital, and it was a most exciting. You're a father, the joy that brings, but then sort of sit there in that uncertainty that okay, we're going to have to ride this out. Who knows what the next few days or months or what's going to unfold, but we rode it out, and we dodged a few bullets through the revolution. Where we were, because we have an apartment out near the pyramids, and where the major prison they let the prison out there was on the way back into Cairo, so they all came back through our sort of neighbourhood. It was a new sort of residential sort of compound development area, and so all of the prisons were coming through. So every night there was gunfire and stuff, and we look out the windows, and it was pretty intense. It was. No, not really. It was hard to explain it. It was scary, but
did it seem real?
No. With that surreal sort of feeling. But I'd barricade every night before we went to bed. I'd barricade the door just in case. I just put a shoe rack there and a couple other things. If anyone did try and come in, at least we had that little line of defence before. But nothing happened, and we got through unscathed. And but a powerful time in history. The Arab Spring, and to be part of it. And my wife, this is how crazy I am. So the revolution went down the first day, and I thought, geez, there's too much action going on here. I've got to go and get in amongst it. So my wife, as I said, she was heavily Jewish, so I chucked her in the car, and we drove down to Tahrir Square, and I've left her up on the bridge on the Nile, and I've gone cruising through the streets just looking for some action.
Oh my gosh! What do you mean cruising for some action? What are you cruising?
Just to see what happened.
Really?
A lot of buildings.
What did you see?
There's a lot of buildings on fire, and a lot of sort of tanks around. around, and all the police vehicles. It used to be these big van things are all tipped over and on fire still. And
let me guess, your wife's not too happy about you.
No, she's not happy at all. Yeah, I could imagine. She couldn't contact me either because there was no phone, so I'm off cruising around.
You think you get in trouble if you stay out late having a few beers? Imagine getting left on a bridge while there's a national revolution
I'll see you
happening.
sometime soon.
Poor thing.
You're in the doghouse. You still are.
I know. She didn't know what she signed up for. The poor thing.
Why didn't she just stay home?
Yeah, well, she was worried about me. Yeah, thought, you can't go down there, but I did. Yeah. And
Wow.
yeah, we got through it, but yeah.
You got talking about the kids. You got sporting blood in you. Your wife's dad played national soccer for Egypt. Is that right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, so he played with a club called Zamalek, which is like a Collingwood, let's say, of the AFL. High profile team. Everyone hates it. Well, there's two teams, the Zamalek and Ali. So he played with probably the one that's more like the Ali. Good. Yeah. So he was a prominent, high profile player and played for the national team. I think two of our uncles played for Zamalek as well. So, he's got some genes, on his mum's side. So, we'll see how he goes. He loves his footy and he's pretty ambitious and he moves pretty well naturally. So we'll see how he goes.
Unreal.
Yeah,
is there father son?
Yeah, so he's eligible under father son to the Bulldogs.
How old is he?
He's 11.
Okay.
So, long way to go, but
7
poor
years
little
to go.
fellow. He plays year 6 and he stepped up yesterday, played year 7s. They needed a win to make the final. Last passage of the day, he's done this desperate act and broke his arm, so he's sort of put his body on the line for even his team.
Did they win or lose?
They won by a point.
Wow. Break his arm, who cares?
Right. He couldn't play finals anyway, but he took one for the team, so I was really proud of that.
Well done.
Has he got it all plastered up?
It's all in the car, so I spent the afternoon yesterday at the hospital. But that's footy though, isn't it? So,
it is. Oh, well, it's good he's got a dad like you. You can say, all right, just dust yourself off, mate. You'll be all right.
You'll be right. Come back bigger and better next time.
What about a couple of things about the current games? We spoke about a little bit before about the physicality involved. I read something about you coming back, haven't seen footy for 10 years, and you went and watched the footy and you're a bit underwhelmed. That was 10 years ago. What about now in terms of just watching the game? Like, how do you see it as a past player who played on some of the great full forwards of all time? Do you like watching it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I love footy as much as I ever have, and I guess my sons love it, so I'm forced to watch the footy, which is a shame, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I still, to be honest with you, I don't enjoy watching it live as much, just purely because the numbers are always flooded back and it's congested and half the oval's empty. There's not, just a full forward and full back sitting down in a goal square. You could heckle and, there's always a little bit of
commentary.
Yeah, a little bit of action, exactly right. So I don't particularly like watching it live. Still love the atmosphere of a live game, don't get me wrong. But when I watch it on the TV and is focused on the action, how quick they are with their hands and decision making and those sort of things, I love the game as much as I ever did. It's, they had to take a lot of those sort of, shirt fronts out of the game just to protect, a lot of past players in a bad state with their sort of, legacy of concussion and those sort of things. So it was open slather back in my day. So, I have to be honest, I do miss that, that physical aspect of the game. But they're supreme athletes and they hit real hard and they move real quick.
Yep.
And there's nowhere to hide on the footy field. And I guess with so much, so many bodies around the action, you're going to get hurt out there.
Did you go to the grand final last year?
I did, yeah. It was amazing to see the Bulldogs playing a grand final here. The result didn't go away, which was disappointing, but that Melbourne performance in that second half of that third quarter was just staggering. Yeah, it was staggering.
What about 16?
Yes.
Did you watch that?
I did. I went to Melbourne for that, which was...
So you were living here?
Yeah, so we're back in WA, and as soon as the Dogs got over the Giants in that prelim, I booked a flight and didn't have a ticket and went on a wing and a prayer, and the Dogs ended up coming through with the goods. Ended up going to the MCC President's Lunch, so I was hobnobbing it that day, mate, and it was just amazing experience, just for more so just for the supporters who, as I said, they embraced me as a young guy coming to the club, and just to see what they'd been through over such a long period of time without success and how loyal they were to their footy club, and just to see the joy and excitement on the supporters' face. It was just and some of my teammates' boys were playing, so that Libber's young fellow was playing, and Lockie Hunter was obviously running around, and so that makes it pretty special as well when some of your old teammates, the next generation, are playing.
That's pretty cool.
And even like one of your current teammates, Bob one of the teammates you had, Bob Murphy, being involved as well in that, which surprised me this morning. I was looking and saw that you guys were teammates, because Bob Murphy just doesn't seem like he was playing as when you were playing. That was a long time ago.
So I got Bob just on the crossover. So my last season was 9,000 and Bob's...
99. You said 9,000.
9,000. Last 9,000. I've lost the plot. Yeah. So 2,000 was my last year.
And it was his first.
It was his first. Yeah. So we just sort of.
So you taught him everything you know.
I did. We did go on a pre-season game to Wellington together.
Wow.
Actually, yeah. So we didn't have a long career together, but still having that initial sort of, I guess, relationship. I like to think that I used to welcome new players to the club pretty well. He probably got a different view on it, but he's probably that like just taught me the whole time. Yeah. Who's he trying to kid? But so it was good to have that connection. And I played with Luke Beveridge. My very first pre-season camp, we shared a tent together when we sort of went sailing down the Gippsland.
So you had your fingerprints all over the premiership.
Yeah, so we did. Mate. Yeah, exactly right. I'm going to claim it.
Yeah, very good.
My doing, but yeah, it was a unique, special experience.
Dan's got one last question to finish us off.
Can you please tell us about your hair being stolen?
Yeah. Well, your hair, but then your hair being stolen. So it was the hair that was playing along with everyone, right? You growing the mullet out. You liked it.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's not past tense.
I loved it. As I said, I thought it was a nice, thick, healthy mane of hair. But others would disagree. But
so it got stolen off your head.
So basically,
it's called genetics, mate. Mine got stolen off my head too.
I
said before, my wife went to snip, she cut it off, and so I was cherishing this ponytail that I had.
Wow.
And I had it in my drawer with all my sort of, I guess, over there. I didn't have too much. I went with a backpack and came back with the wife and the kid, but I had a few little personal belongings that were in a drawer, and my house got broken into. And what had happened is the people that owned the apartment lived upstairs, and they had a maid who had a key to our apartment, and so she'd come in and helped herself to, iPods and cameras and a little bit of jewelry.
Straight down to cash converted.
My hair.
What?
You would not believe it, my hair. So when I sort of tried to work out what had happened, and then I went to the owner upstairs and said, listen, mate, someone's been in the house. What's going on? We worked out it was her because they found the camera and they found, the other stuff sort of stashed away in her room in their apartment. And I said, mate, what about the hair?
Don't worry about the
stuff. That's irreplaceable. The hair's never coming back. And so you're trying to explain to some Egyptian sort of middle-aged man that my hair has been stolen, like in my bad Arabic, saying, and he's like,
he's
what?
Like, yeah, mate, you can't
I said, I don't want the camera or the iPod. I just want my hair. And he's like, mate, your hair's not coming back.
Did you get it back?
No. So I was worried about witchcraft. I'm sort of, little bit of a connection to the spiritual world and that sort of stuff. And there's a thing called hijab over there where they do witchcraft still. And I was worried that she was going to do a little bit of witchcraft with my hair. So that was my major concern. And also the fact that my hair was never coming back. And that was the last of it, mate. The last rain.
That is just unreal. You've actually made me think, I'm going to get Dan to do social media. Okay, you're going to do it by yourself because I need to go back and I need to show Daniel on our podcast a photo of me from a footy trip in years gone by because
that photo makes me sick.
I'm going to get the photo.
All right, so this is social media.
I can introduce this. Social media. I'm sure you know about this. It's probably why you're here. Social media, one of the great podcasting segments of all time. Not social, Scotial. Yes, you saw what I did there. That's right. Social media, where the people get to ask you the questions. You've heard enough from Dan and I. This is from the people for you, mate. Brilliant. So we've got a few here, actually.
This is from Shane.
And I'm going to find this photo.
Yeah, you find that photo. Shane Haddo. Did you ever get an offer from a barber to sponsor you?
I didn't get an offer from a barber, but I did have a barber in Kilo. I should remember her name, but she used to do the handiwork for me. Not quite like Dusty and these sort of guys that get groomed up before every game. Mine was a once a month type sort of job, but never had the sponsorship. But I don't think they would have done very good business, mate, if I'm the pin-up boy for their barbers. That's for sure.
Should we, while we're talking about hair show, I've got the photo. So
let's go. We'll put this up on YouTube. Actually.
So in about 2016, I'd grown my hair down to my chest basically, and for the footy trip, myself, Tom Barras, Jeremy McGovern thought it'd be pretty funny to shave just the top.
You went to Friar Tuck,
but put the hat on, and so it just looked like I had the same hair. And it was see how long I could last on the footy trip without anyone noticing. And it was 4 days to answer the question. So that's what I was rolling around like, right? So it looks like it's made up, but that's real. And I had a hat on my head. We'll get that up on the show so people. But So once they found out, I thought, what else can I do? So we had one last big night. We got the razors out again, and we ended up in a bathroom shaving some sort of fashionable thing to go out with that night. Now, I'll show you the picture in a second, but my memory is basically we're in Darwin, and the security guards in Darwin, they're pretty used to seeing some strange things, right? So we're going in, and there's 5 people in the line in front of me, and he goes, ID, please. Where have you been tonight? What have you been drinking? Okay, no worries. Giving everyone the full rap. 4 people in front of me. Okay, what's that? Why are you wearing thongs? What do you got on? Gets to me, looks me up and down, and goes, brothers, what's going on, brother? Come in. Like, have a great night, mate. You want drink cards? Go in, get in there. Because I had the Hungarian whip.
Oh, nice.
Right? It's quite good, isn't it?
Brilliant. I love that. I used to have that as well.
I know. I forgot that I was Danny Southern for a day.
Give me the Danny Southern.
Mate, this is the Danny Southern. This isn't the Daniel Southern either. So this is the Danny Southern is a plaited rat tail that comes down halfway down my back. And I walked into a Darwin nightclub and they'd never been happier to see anyone in their life. So there we go. That's enough about hair. What are we up to? Up to Sean Chatty?
Yes.
Sean Chatty _
Of all the current players who could pull off the dirty skullet, like the magic carpet you had flowing, who could pull off the dirty skullet now that you had flowing back?
Pardon? Start no. Please read that again.
Sorry. Of all the current players, who
could pull off the dirty skullet like a magic carpet you had flowing at the back of your head back in the day?
I'm going to put a comma where there should be
maybe. Dusty would wear it very well, I reckon. Dusty would wear it good, but it makes me reflect. And you look at someone like Bailey Smith. You know, he's a pin-up boy of the competition. Probably looks a little bit better than what I do. Yeah, as far as the cosmetics and stuff like that. But his mullet is, you know, all-time epic sort of level.
The mullet's coming back.
Yeah, I know. So
you're a trendsetter.
Yeah, but before, definitely ahead of my time.
Yeah.
So I would love to see Mitch Robertson's got a little bit of a rat tail.
He does
at the moment.
I saw that. It's almost it's an off kilter one too.
Little thin one.
Or Jedi tail.
Yeah, correct. This is just a reflection. Ellie and Bo.
My very first signature in the autograph book back in the Claremont days must have been yours.
Wow. I don't think I had an autograph back in the Claremont days.
1993.
I'd like to see it and see if it's still my autograph.
Do you notice the Western Bulldogs jumper back?
I did notice that when I came in.
And the Orca. You would have played against that, I reckon.
I reckon.
Or was that early 2000s?
Maybe I might have missed that one, but it's good to see the Bulldog one up there. You've gone all out there, Will. That one out.
Inception _ Incept.
Who was the worst and best teammate to room with at away games?
I wouldn't be able to tell you who I teammated with. My memory of footy is gone. The 64 megabytes, mate, of memory is full. When I spend that time in the library, I have to dump. I reckon I've dumped a fair bit of my footy stuff. But I used to room with Steve Crediuk. He was, backman.
Yeah.
I was playing down in the men's department. He used to stick pretty fat. So he didn't have any out of there sort of.
This is the sort of man I like to have on the podcast. Men's department. So we've got some merch here on BackChat, Danny. They're all backman merch. So one of them says on the back of it, it was the midfield's fault.
100%.
Correct.
How good's that?
There's another one that says forwards sell memberships, mids sign sponsorship, bit of coin, backs win premierships.
Never been a truer word.
Correct.
Never been a truer word.
So if you do want to get those, backchatpodcast.com.au/merch. We'll get Daniel out of the door in some, I reckon, today. Double Dragon 45.
Favourite country to travel to?
Oh, it'd have to be. That's a really tough question.
You've been to a few by the sounds.
Yeah, I've been lucky, yeah. I'd say Egypt, purely because of
you
the
live there, though.
history there. I live there. But for me to travel, I'm Kenya. I'll go to Kenya.
Wow.
Yeah, I love the Maasai tribe. I always wanted to be a Maasai warrior, which back in the day meant you had to go and kill a lion with a spear, which would have been pretty intimidating. But
javelin thrower.
And they'd braid their hair, and that my hairstyle was a little bit inspired by the Maasai Maran or the warriors over there. But
you got some spears, didn't you?
Yeah, I do. I've got a couple spears. Yeah, I do. I have one that I actually change it for a couple pairs of smelly old footy socks and a disposable camera. If you remember the disposable camera, get one shot. This poor Maasai bloke, he was going to take his 24 photos and then I don't know what else he's going to do with that in a Maasai Mara. But anyway, so
there's
I
no
scammed
developer
him.
down the street.
Yeah, but he actually hunted a lion with that particular spear.
Wow.
So I've got a couple at home, which
That's pretty special.
Give him a throw down at the local
No,
park.
I've never gone and thrown them, mate. It would be pretty ugly, I reckon, if I tried to launch one of them. Yeah, so I'd say Kenya for the cultural and the wildlife.
That's incredible, isn't it? I mean, you've been to some a lot of African travel and Middle Eastern. Is that sort of
predominantly? Done most of South America as well. I actually haven't done much of Europe. Yeah, my philosophy is that Europe's been pretty consistent for the last 100 years, where the developing world was changing quite rapidly. So I wanted to go and explore and interact with some indigenous cultures while we had the chance before they were influenced too much by the West.
Does underscore blend? We love an underscore here.
If you weren't drafted by the Western Bulldogs, where would have you liked to have played?
As in which team? Probably, I would have loved to play for one of the big Melbourne teams, like a Collingwood would be. Yeah, I know a lot of people hate Collingwood, but as far as supporter base and I think the Pie supporters are very passionate, and
you would have had some Pie supporters with the same haircut. I reckon.
Definitely. Yeah, I might add a few more teeth than a few of them, but yeah, I think Collingwood would be a great club to play for. Imagine playing in front of 80,000 every week. Every week.
I don't know if you saw the Collingwood Carlton game. We sort of make these a bit timeless, but if you saw that game, 90,000 people at the MCG, both sets of fans just going ballistic as a point the difference. It'll be spoken about for literally decades, that game.
Yeah, it was
incredible.
Finish, wasn't it? It was good for the Bulldog supporters too, I was riding that one the whole way. I was riding that the whole way. Yeah.
So the Bulldogs players are going bananas in the rooms. We're not sure when this will go to air, but hopefully, after Bulldogs win a premiership this year. I do want to say 2 more questions left. John_boy_Jones.
Did you enjoy pre-seasons, and how do you prepare for them?
I love pre-season. The preparation wasn't good. I'd always have surgery at the end of the season, and I'd take off travelling. And so a lot of my travels actually took me to high altitude. So I would walk around just sightseeing, being a tourist, and I'd actually come back and blitz the 4K time trials. And everyone would say, "What'd you do in the off-season?" I was, nothing at all. So just walking around at altitude. You walk 10Ks, whatever it might have been a day, sort of sightseeing, and to come back in really good nick. But I used to love training. In reflection, it would have been good to have bit more, development as far as, strength and conditioning. Because, when we did the pre-season back then, regardless of what your body condition was in, you did everything. So if you're doing a 10K road run, you're running a 10K road run, you're never getting a leave pass. So, I might have played another year or two. I wouldn't have got another 10 years out of my knee, but, definitely probably would have got a couple more years if you were playing in the current sort of climate.
Well, that's the travel stuff. You end up in wherever you end up. I remember we did a trip to Israel and Tel Aviv, and we were meant to be there for about 3 nights, and we stayed for about 3 weeks, Matt Spanger and I. And training, look, we used to run, but it would be on asphalt.
Yep.
Rather than going to an oval, there was no ovals down where we were staying. And so you just end up doing like a 6K session on asphalt and be sore for days because you'd go and have a couple of drinks afterwards, and then you'd go out and do no recovery. and then it'd be about 5 days before you go for another run. So traveling, I'm similar. You love traveling, but it wasn't coercive all the time to a great pre-season.
Not at all.
Last one from, you can go that.
The big ticket.
The big ticket.
Best footy trip story.
Best footy trip.
You went to Vegas.
Vegas, and what happens in Vegas? It stays in Vegas, doesn't it? Yeah, but there was a few shenanigans. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys know lizard wrestling. Lizard wrestling? Yeah, I don't know much about lizard wrestling.
I would like to
idea.
know.
I'd like to know about it, yeah.
Things happen on footy trips, but yeah, so you get a belt and you put it around your head.
I know what this
someone else's head, and you have to pull backwards. But when guys are lizard wrestling and they're butt naked, that's not pretty. So I won't throw anyone under the bus, but that was probably for a young man at 19 years of age going on a footy trip and watching 2 grown men lizard wrestling. It was not pretty at all. So yeah, that scarred me for life.
Perfect. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of Dan Southern, the podcast. Mate, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Some great stories, great memories, a great footballer, but also a fair bit going on outside of footy too, mate. So it's been a great chat. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Now, I know you'll know all this stuff, Dan, but just to remind our listeners, you want to find us on socials, BackChat _. You want to send us an email, hello@ backchatpodcast.com.au. All of our stuff is on our website, backchatpodcast.com.au. A big thank you to all of our supporters and sponsors, Whippersnapper, Shelter, Blue Bet, Margaret River Roasting Co., Leadable Cameras, and of course Dean Bradley Real Estate. You guys help us do what we do. Pretty good, right?
Brilliant.
Good man.
Couldn't have done it better, mate.
Very good. We'll see you at some time over the next week.